I mean, I always knew there was this man who was my father, but I'd been told by my biological mother for a really long time, in very limited communication that we'd had, that there was no hope of me ever finding him. 38 years ago, I was born in Joburg at the Santon Mediclinic, and my biological mother is a white British woman, and my biological father, my dad, is a black South African guy, and they'd met while she was working in a hotel in Joburg. I guess it would have been probably about 40 years ago now, and they had a relationship. She was getting married to a local guy, a white South African guy, but had this relationship with my dad. And it wasn't until after I was born, sometime, like at least 3 weeks after I was born, that she realized that I wasn't the child of her now husband, but instead was the child of my dad, who she'd had a relationship with. So obviously, it being apartheid and the Morality Act was in place, it was a crime for them to have had a relationship. So a story was concocted, a plan was concocted that they needed to get rid of this baby who they'd called Karoline. When I say they, not my dad, who obviously in terms of power and agency at that time in South Africa would have had none. Her and her husband decided that they needed to get Karoline out of the country. So they took me to the UK, and I was adopted there by a white family in the south of England. As an adoptee, I think the sense of family is one that's very complex, because you have this family of origin that you came from, but who for most adoptees are essentially strangers. And then you have this family that you've been brought into, which in any other sense of the word, they also would be strangers, because there's no blood connection to you. So you find yourself kind of treading quite a rocky ground and having difficulty finding what family really means. It was something that I always wanted to have, this idea of family, to be able to look into somebody's face and say, we have the same eyes, or we have the same smile, or we share certain characteristics. But it wasn't until I met my dad, my biological father, after the book came out, that I realized I had a whole new sense of what family means. It means like genuine acceptance and love, and a lack of shame, and it's acceptance. I hired private investigators to find him, and I couldn't, and I just thought, I'm never going to find this man. And he was such a crucial part of my identity, and my identity as a South African, my identity as a black South African. So it was imperative that I found him. When the book came out, in the book I'd written, I hadn't given people's real names, for my biological mother and my dad's name, because it wasn't necessary. It wasn't about exactly the names of who these people are. It was about the story. Did an interview, a radio interview, and gave my dad's real name. And it was a kind of spur of the moment thing, and Black Twitter galvanized. And it was a beautiful thing. And before I knew it, tweets and Facebook posts and all sorts were kind of flying all over the place. And within 24 hours, someone had sent me a message saying, could this be your dad? And had a phone number and a name and everything. And within 25 hours, we were speaking on the phone. And then a week later, we met. I flew up to Joburg, and we met, and I can honestly say it was the best moment of my life. He's a wonderful, wonderful, loving, accepting man who loves me as if he raised me. And I think he feels that the hardest thing about it is that he carries guilt, that he wasn't able to be there for me in the way that he has been able to be there for my siblings. But I always remind him, you know, Dad, you were in a position where you didn't have the power to do anything. And hopefully he'll come to terms with that. I've had a wonderful reunion with my dad, but I haven't had that with my biological mother at all. It's been traumatizing. It's been a secondary rejection. I got in touch with her when I was about 19 or 20. She said she never wanted to hear from me again. I was the worst mistake she ever made. To carry that having already been relinquished to strangers, essentially, is really difficult. So it's a complex relationship. I know that my mom, the woman that I call mom, the woman that raised me, is happy for me. She knows how important it is, but that's not to say that she probably doesn't have her own issues around it. Although my identity doesn't exist solely as a result of him, he is so much a part of who I am. I'm proud that I've made him proud, and I'm proud that he is proud of me being his daughter. I'm Sara-Jayne King. This is my story. What's your story?